just taking a wee go with it. Perfect, that's us live. So thank you so much everyone for joining Aberlour Children's Charity's latest Twitch live stream. We had a couple of weeks off with a wee break, but now we're back live and kicking, and we will have a live stream every week right up to Christmas time. So please follow our channel to keep up to date with all those streams. Today I'm joined by my lovely colleague Allan. Hello Allan.
Hello.
So as all of you will know by now, Aberlour Children's Charity is a charity who supports children, young people and families across Scotland, and we are committed to fighting poverty and discrimination. And Allan is one of our befriending volunteer coordinators as part of our Scottish Guardianship service. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Allan.
Thanks for having me.
You're going to be telling us some very interesting information about a really important service today. So could you give everyone a bit of information about what the Scottish Guardianship Service is?
Of course. So in a nutshell, the Scottish Guardianship Service is run by Aberlour, of course, but in partnership with the Scottish Refugee Council. And what we do is support newly arrived unaccompanied child refugees. So young people that have arrived or been found in the UK and in Scotland, who are unaccompanied by family or caregivers and will now be going through the asylum process to seek refuge in Scotland.
Perfect, thank you very much. Now, if anybody has any questions for Allan, please pop them in the chat bar and we'll get through as many as we can. So, Allan, can you explain why our guardianship service is needed?
Yeah, of course. I think really fortunately it's a service that is recognised as being incredibly vital, and from the Scottish Government, who fund the bulk of the project. And really, if you can imagine the difficulties of arriving in a new country without family and without support, I think even as an adult or a very kind of robust and resilient adult, that is an incredibly traumatic and kind of difficult process. So to have a service like ourselves who can support the young people to navigate all that they're surrounded by now is really vital. That we're lucky in that our young people get quite a big, robust support network put around them. They'll be allocated a social worker and they'll get put into either supported accommodation, young person's accommodation, or sometimes with foster carers. They will get provided with a lawyer that will help them go through and do the kind of legal parts of their asylum process. But what they really need in that kind of network is someone that kind of sits in the middle of it and can help them navigate the world they're in now, why they have to speak to this person, why they have to do these things, answer these questions for their lawyer. So really our guardians play such a vital role in being someone that can offer them a real sort of stability point, a kind of grounding point, explain to them the processes that they're now going to go through, how they work, and reassure them that they're supported through that process, reassure them that there is care for them and there's people that can respond to their needs, and someone that's there to listen. I think that's kind of one of the most important things for young people, is just having someone that they feel they can turn to and actually, turn to for advice or some reassurance.
Yeah, it must be really, really scary coming somewhere. I guess you said in the start that we support unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people. Can you explain what that term means? A bit jargony.
Yeah. So, like I said, what we're kind of talking about is any young person who's arrived in the UK or in Scotland without any family. So our young people are under the age of 18 and are sort of children, but don't have any family that they've arrived with. So they're alone and with no one to kind of responsible for their care, no adult with them responsible for their care. And therefore, they come into the care of the local authority that they're found in or moved to. So we work specifically with children that are in that situation where they are separated from their family. This might be that the journey started without their family. In some cases, it may be that they've become separated from their family on their journey to Scotland.
Yeah. So can you explain why these children, young people would be coming to Scotland in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's a very broad topic, I think, with a kind of an incredibly long list of reasons. But I suppose there's kind of one overarching thing that that means they need to flee, and it's safety. You know, our young people are seeking safety, whether that's from persecution due to kind of protected characteristics, because of their associations with parents or political affiliations. It could be at risk of war. It could be risk of conscription, either into to armed forces or perhaps into sort of non-official armed groups. So, you know, the list of things is incredibly long, but I suppose the overarching theme is that it's because they're at risk. They're at risk where they are, and they need safety. A large proportion of the young people we work with as well, about 45%, are victims of trafficking. So in this case, you know, people that have been trafficked are people that have been that are being exploited. So they're being moved from one place to the other, with the aim of exploitation.
Yeah. So to support our young people, the Guardianship Service does have a number of projects within it, to give them the support that they need. Can you give us an overview of each of those projects?
I can. It's quite a big overview now as the project's going to continue to grow. So the bulk of our staff do kind of the work that I've explained. They're caseworking the young people and supporting them to navigate this system they've now found themselves in. But what the project's done, you know, since 2009, since it existed or started, is trying to look to where maybe there's gaps in the young person support. How can we start to create perhaps a more kind of holistic approach to support the young people need? And from that, quite a few projects have grown. So, for example, we have a mental health project in-house now called Allies, and we have 2 members of staff there, Alexis and Lorna. This project, as well as some other additional ones, are supported by the Asylum Migration Integration Fund. So our fund is slightly different. The Allies project is a partnership as well with the NHS Psychological Trauma Service, the Anchor, and the main part of their work is a 10-week group work programme, where they can get young people to come together, share their experiences, hopefully learn some coping strategies that might help them deal with symptoms of trauma. And I think just having experience or an opportunity to speak with other young people, to be open about their feelings and what they're experienced, it's aiming to normalise the reactions and experiences, because our young people have so many parallels, you know, in their personal experience and the trauma they've faced, even as they've come from in different ways from lots of different places. They've also kind of broadened the work they do quite a bit. So they run sleep workshops. One of the kind of highlighted issues for our young people is difficulty sleeping. And so the Allies project have done a lot of work to put together you know, sessions and packs for young people to learn about sleep hygiene, you know, that coffee before certain times of the night is not a great idea, that things like some of the juices you drink might keep you awake from relaxation techniques, and maybe you could have you know, a dim light or some pillow spray. So I've done a lot of work through that. And Lorna, our colleague, who's a qualified art therapist, has also runs an art club, which is incredibly popular with our young people as well, facilitating a space where they can come and sort of express themselves through art. And they always kind of love being able to get stuck into something and be able to do some pretty incredible stuff as well. It's always a kind of delight when the group's finished to kind of run into the room and to see what's been made. So that's just one branch of our work. We also have a lot of participation work. It's a part of our project that's really important. And we have 2 members of staff, Stefan and Nadia, who are part of the Scottish Refugee Council, but are placed within our team. And they do a lot of work around supporting our young people's opportunities and trying to make sure their voices are heard. So one of the big pieces of work they've done in the last year is creating a group which the young people themselves have called Young People's Voices. And it's a group and a space for young people to have their voice heard. It's a place where they're in the driving seat and they can sort of say, here are the key issues that we want to raise. And that's been things like access to education and ESOL, maybe access to ESOL and the fact that, well, they have other learning needs they'd like to work on that aren't just covered by learning English, feeding back on the asylum process and the care system. And that group have visited the Scottish Parliament and the Young People's Commissioner for Scotland. It's a kind of democratic group where the young people voted the name and worked together to kind of direct where their work is going. There's also a lot about kind of recruitment. So participation is all about making sure young people influences the service they use. So our young people are used actively in our interview process. Young people are used in interviewing new staff members and feeding in what a good staff member looks like to them. What do we need to know about the people that we recruit to support them? Also, we have a group night every 2 weeks. We work in partnership with an arts organisation called Standing Tall Arts, and one of their staff members, Megan, arranges lots of incredibly interesting and fun group nights that take place a couple of times a week. And they've done things from drumming to drama to rapping workshops to beatboxing, cooking, filmmaking, even kite making. So they do a lot of work around kind of promoting opportunities for our young people. Another one that's in there as well is sort of sports opportunities. So we have a football group every Monday because it's highlighted as such a sort of important activity for young people, but not always the easiest to access in terms of finding things and affording to play. And we also have a kind of weekend group where some other sports are played, like badminton and basketball. And one of our sort of incredibly committed volunteers, Kevin, has been doing a lot of work with our staff and keeping those going for quite a significant amount of time. I should apologise. I said that I'm going to talk for quite a while. This
No, it's so interesting. I think it's just amazing to let everyone understand the scale of the service and all the different, like the strands and all the different support that our young people need, because they don't have their mum or dad there to help them that we would have. So
and I suppose what kind of comes into that social aspect is what I do, myself and my colleague Tom. So we coordinate a befriending program, and essentially why that exists, or why it began to exist, is, you know, I've explained that kind of network of people that are involved in supporting our young people, and it's brilliant, it's quite robust, it's large, but everyone's also got very set remits in what they do. And for professionals, that's often kind of very important day-to-day nuts and bolts stuff, you know, so making sure there's housing provision, making sure there's finance, college placements, making sure they're seeing their lawyer, that they feel supported, they're explained the process. What a lot of these professionals in their, you know, big amounts of work and remits don't necessarily have time for is some of the kind of perhaps lighter touch, but equally important elements of somebody feeling sort of supported and welcome and safe in a new place. And that's kind of just getting to explore, to get out and about, to learn about their new city, to learn a bit about the language, the culture, where they can go to do fun things, where certain buses go. And that's kind of where the befriending project kind of came from, was the understanding that we could recruit kind of committed volunteers that would maybe meet up with our young people once a week and do some of that important work. So it's very much focused on fun and enjoyment. It is going to museums, bowling, walks in parks, going for coffees, for some food, and maybe getting out of Glasgow to see things like the seaside or a loch or whatever it might be. But in doing that, it's providing a really vital, relaxed relationship for the young person, where perhaps the relationships tend to be a bit more professional. We can provide someone that's still boundaried in what they do, but it's a much more relaxed environment. They don't have to talk about their background, their story, important things for their case, their housing, whatever it might be. Hopefully it's an opportunity just to relax, but also hopefully a place to build up your knowledge of the city, start to build more of a map in your head of how actually you can navigate where it is that you live and what opportunities exist for you. And one of the most popular or biggest parts of feedback we get from young people, both in terms of what they're looking for and how they feel the service benefits them, is English practice. You know, a lot of our young people will arrive with kind of no English or a very small amount of English. And the feedback we get constantly is, you know, we learn in college, and it's, you know, we wouldn't be able to learn without it, but we learn very structured stuff. What we're able to do is now have a conversation where I've got to try and just communicate in English. And we get really positive feedback on how much that helps. And it's fascinating as a staff member that maybe sees some of the young people less, because I don't, you know, because I coordinate the matches rather than casework the way the Guardians do. When we do our reviews every few months, it always kind of blows my mind how much young people have gained confidence, both in themselves and in the language. And I think that it's just such an ultimately powerful thing for young people to feel like they're building the confidence to be able to express themselves. So, so that's the kind of the kind of befriending service in a nutshell as well. We recruit and train the volunteers, and it's obviously really important for us to make sure that, you know, the volunteers feel safe and have the skills and knowledge they need to complete the role. And obviously it's equally important for us to make sure we have confidence in the people that are meeting a young person, that they're able to do it. And they can meet once a week, once every couple of weeks for kind of 6 months. But it's a kind of a loose time frame in the sense it is much more about the needs of the young people and what we can do to support them than it is to...
We're getting a visitor joining our stream today. I'm so sorry. Hello. Yeah, hello. Right. I'm just going to talk to Alan just now, okay? Okay. Yeah. So, Alan, you started talking about the volunteers there. What is it the volunteers would be doing with our young people? Can you give a bit more in-depth description?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's a kind of a commitment of a weekly meeting. Now, the reality is sometimes a weekly is not feasible with their schedule, the young person's schedule, but loosely a week to every 2 weeks. In terms of what they're doing, it is really focused on fun. One of the kind of wonderful things about befriending is it's not necessarily about sitting the young person down and saying, these are the things that we're going to achieve. These are your goals. We do sit down and do some goal setting based on things they want to do, but it's much more about facilitating a kind of relaxing and fun space to explore their opportunities. We're trying to make it as young person led as possible. So we do a bit of work in the beginning to find out their interests, what things they might want to do. But there's also a reality in that we're working with young people who are new to their city, that are new to Scotland, and maybe aren't that sure what opportunities exist here, what things they can do. So it's a kind of collaboration of, you know, getting interest from the young person, getting to know them a bit better and what their interests might be, so that we can suggest things for them, and also to kind of facilitate opportunities that they are highlighting they've seen or they've heard that friends do, or that they did at home, certain sports or hobbies, and where they can kind of take part in some of those things here.
Sorry, I can't share my popcorn with you there.
I know.
No, it's amazing. So what would a volunteer get out for themselves being a befriender? Because it's something, obviously, they're giving up their time. So what is it that the benefit is for them, not just the young person?
Yeah, and I'm glad you've asked that, actually, because I think it's quite an important point with volunteering, where it's sometimes seen as this sort of entirely selfless giving of time, which of course it is, but it is incredibly generous. But really, our volunteers get lots from the project. I volunteered with the project before I worked with it, and I know I'm incredibly biased, and I'll probably say this several times, but we are very fortunate in Guardianship to work with the most incredible group of young people. And they're an absolute delight to spend time with. It's very inspiring to kind of work with them and to see sort of their strength and their resilience. And also to learn, you know, it's not just a one-way thing where we're always talking about sort of, this is how Scotland works, this is Scottish culture, this is what we do, or these activities that I like. It's an exchange. You're learning about one another, about one another's kind of interests and hobbies and cultures. And so the feedback we get from our volunteers is incredibly popular and positive, sorry. And I guess the other point of our projects that's really important as well is, although we are talking about fun activities, about going to the cinema, going for bowling, having a wander around, it's actually incredibly impactful. You know, our volunteers are in a brilliant opportunity to actually have quite a direct impact in this young person's experience of arriving in their new city, of feeling welcome, of sort of accelerating the pace of which they begin to feel settled and happy, and like this place is somewhere they feel safe and they belong, and well, they know they can go here to do this, and they know that such and such bus can take them there. So it's really it's an impactful role and quite a powerful role to have, and I think that our volunteers really benefit from that, and we kind of make sure we have kind of regular supervisions where we can sort of make that point in terms of how impactful it is.
Well, that's really interesting, though. You said that you got into the role you're in just now because you were a volunteer.
Yeah.
Was that, or why? I guess my question then is why did you want to volunteer? Was it to get a job, or?
Yeah, well, so I've done quite a lot of work in Glasgow, actually, volunteering, running opportunities for adult refugees. So I'd kind of came from a social care background, and it was kind of where I was looking to hopefully shift my career into, because I was working in mental health before. And yeah, I just sort of, as soon as I saw the role, knew it was something I was interested in. At that point, it was ran by some colleagues that are now guardians, which is quite nice, so everyone's still about. But yeah, I suppose for me, it was just an opportunity to get to work with someone. You know, I'd come from a support working background and had gone into more coordinating posts. And so I knew the impact an individual can have when you've got a bit of time to give to a person and to listen to them and to offer a sort of person-centered approach, and to be creative with their interests and your interests, and kind of facilitate a fun space that hopefully helps them build up some confidence. So yeah, and that's kind of what attracted me to the volunteer role, and it was obviously something that I was really keen to be a part of when kind of staff roles became available.
Oh, brilliant. And if anyone's watching this is wanting to become a befriender just now, are you looking for any volunteers at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're doing a bit of a focus on matching because we had a recruitment recently. However, I suspect we'll probably look quite early into the new year to recruit. So we don't have adverts live now. However, if anyone is watching this and is kind of interested, if you go onto the volunteering opportunities on the Aberlour website, you can lodge a note of interest with the service, and you can lodge a note of interest with the Befriending Young Refugees project. If we're not recruiting now and you're looking for things sooner, then Aberlour has a wide range of volunteering opportunities across Scotland. So you can also note that you're looking to volunteer, and a member of staff will get in touch about the kind of range of things that are available.
Great. So I guess we've really touched on how much the service has grown. So when I started, the service was only in Glasgow. So can you tell us where else it's based and where we would be looking for volunteers if they were wanting to note their
interest? And I suppose that's been kind of one of the biggest focuses of our project in Befriending Young Refugees and the Guardianship as a whole in the last couple of years. Is, we're working with more and more young people, and we're seeing a much greater dispersal of young people across Scotland. As well as young people being kind of found in local authorities, they could be transferred through a system that's called the National Transfer Scheme. So that will look at places like Kent, for example, that geographically tend to have more arrivals than other parts of the UK. So young people are distributed. So we've got places all across Scotland that are now taking more unaccompanied refugees, or perhaps now supporting their first unaccompanied refugees. So it's been a point for the project as a whole to begin to respond to that and offer a service across Scotland. So we've got Guardians based in Edinburgh and Aberdeen in the Highlands now, and we've been doing a similar thing with our volunteers. So we've had our first volunteers in Edinburgh, Perth, Stirling, Fife, and Aberdeen, and in the Highlands as well. So a lot of our young people are in Glasgow. We are very interested in people from all across Scotland. So if anyone's listening is interested, do just get in touch with the role, particularly if it's helpful. Across Fife and Dundee, Perth is really important for us just now, and so is Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. But if you are in a different area and are interested, get in touch, and we'll see if it's something we can facilitate.
Wonderful. We've had a wee question through, and they've just asked, where do the young people stay while they're going through the asylum process?
Yep, so it tends to be one of two things, certainly initially. It's either in supported young person's accommodation, because I guess the difference between being an adult going through the asylum process and a child is that you're in Scotland, you're recognised as a child first, and therefore you're recognised as a young person that's in need of care. So just so you are taken into the care of the local authority. So normally it'll be young person's supported accommodation, or it can be foster placements as well. So they might stay with foster families while they're here. As they kind of go through the process, maybe get a bit older, a bit more independent, then they might move independently into flats, or sometimes in things like student accommodation. That's a good question.
Perfect. And is that something that we would support them with when they're making their moves?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of one of the key bits of work is making them do that. I actually should apologise because I've forgotten one of the other key branches of our service now is our support workers. So we have 4 support workers in-house, and they kind of help massively with practical tasks and orientation for the young people, and how they're going to make transitions, things that are going to impact them in their daily life, like having to have a bank account. One of the big ones I'm sure you're aware of across Aberlour is the Young Scot cards now with bus travel. So we have staff on hand that help with those transitions and make sure they feel supported, understand why they're moving from here to there, helping them feel more settled, and knowing the kind of area around them.
And we've had another couple of questions through. We've actually been asked, are young people usually successful in their application for asylum, and if they're not, what happens?
Yeah, so it's a very complicated process, and it's something that's ever changing. As kind of laws and acts change in the UK, there's been quite a significant change recently. The reality is, for young people, fortunately, due to their age and how that kind of increases a vulnerability factor, it is actually rare for a young person. It doesn't mean that the process is fast, though, and that's the trade-off. So some young people do have to wait a very unfortunate length of time. You know, theoretically, if your application isn't successful, which is sometimes, there's also quite a number of layers of appeal process you can go through. You know, unfortunately, the end of that appeal service would be something having to return, which is very sad, but also very, very rare for children.
Okay.
There's also, I don't overcomplicate things, but there's also different types of refugee status that you can be granted. So there's some that maybe allow you to remain here until you're 18 and an adult, or might give you different levels of protection. So it's much more common that you might get one of those rather than refugee status. Yeah.
All the questions are coming through now. So you mentioned earlier on that a lot of the children and young people support have been trafficked. Is there any, we've been asked, is there any way of helping the children reunite with their families if they have been trafficked?
So it's quite a complicated one. These are really good questions. One of the difficulties, I think, with trafficking is that quite often it takes place in their home country, and therefore, in a lot of cases, the safest thing is actually to support them here, because actually to return to their family could put them at potential risk of re-trafficking. Very complicated world that it'd be quite difficult to explain, even if I had the knowledge quickly. But there are systems generally for reuniting families, but they are quite difficult. So there's a lot of work through the Red Cross, and they have a family a system for searching for your family. So it is possible, if you are in the UK and you've received refugee status, to look for to be reunited with your family. And what that would normally involve is, if you can locate family who are at risk or vulnerable, they might be still at home, they might be often in a refugee camp somewhere, and there is procedures to try and bring them their family to you, so you can reunite in the UK. But it's quite a difficult process as well. It's a really good question.
I guess it's something that a lot of us will never be able to comprehend fully. So it's quite difficult to. I guess the war in Ukraine is obviously something that a lot of us are very aware of at the moment. How are we supporting the children and young people coming from there?
Yeah, it's interesting, because we work with unaccompanied young people. We haven't seen it having initially a particular impact on our service. Also, because we're helping young people through the asylum process, the scheme that's been set up to support Ukrainian families and children is actually arriving with status. So you don't go through the asylum process, you're granted refugee status. However, as I've explained, we're always reacting and constantly growing in the guardianship service. So we are actually now, in the coming days, launching a service specifically to support Ukrainian children and host families. So that project begins kind of through November, funded by the Scottish Government, and it will provide kind of more of a wraparound service to support the whole family. So the newly arrived child, the accompanying adult, if there is one, and the host family. Because it's coming through a sponsor scheme, the support's slightly different. So it's going to be a lot more work around resettlement into settling into Scotland. So they may arrive in the UK alone, they meet with an accompanying adult, or project workers that will be part of this. And we've got 5 new project workers starting with us for this project. We'll offer one-to-one support, information and advice. They'll work closely with partners like social work that are supporting the young people as well, to kind of create support plans. But it'll be lots of practical support, like helping them get registered with local GPs, helping them find access to the local school or colleges. When you are granted refugee status or arrive, your kind of financial access is quite different. So it will also involve some kind of welfare rights support to make sure the families are supported appropriately.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's good to know that we are adapting to situations and helping everyone that needs our help. Well, I guess we've talking for quite a while now, and I think we could keep going for ages. But I just wanted to end with a question just about you, about what's been your proudest moment in your role.
Yeah, it's a great question. I suppose if I'm like personally, it's being able to start to see our service expand beyond Glasgow. As you can imagine, in Glasgow has been a kind of dispersal city for adult refugees for quite some time. So there's very large communities within Glasgow, whereas with young people being distributed more widely, there's perhaps at times higher risk of kind of feeling a bit more isolated and kind of rural communities or areas where they might not have other people that speak their language or from their community in the same town. So I suppose I'm very proud to see that start to expand for a personal note. But I think really what a lot of in the project, and I think a lot of staff would agree with this, a lot of our sort of pride comes through kind of our young people, kind of working with our young people, seeing them, being inspired by their strength and their stories, and seeing them begin to start to move into the towards their goals and their dreams. And we sort of are constantly sharing sort of success stories and highlights and things we've been up to in our kind of team meetings and teams chats. And I think that probably is the proudest thing for me. And as well as kind of working with such a wonderful staff team. At the Guardianship, we're incredibly fortunate to have a very large team, but of kind of really kind of wonderful human beings. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to kind of work alongside them all and begin to see the impact it has on the young people, I suppose. But I suppose for me, the pride comes from seeing what the young people are managing to achieve, to see kind of their strength and their resilience, and to be kind of inspired by that. Is the wonderful part of being in the guardianship service.
I think that's a perfect way to leave it. Thank you so much, Alan, for today.
No,
that was really, really interesting. And sorry for my
No,
guess.
not at all. More the better.
Well, everyone, if you enjoyed listening to Alan there, then please follow our channel to keep up to date with the live streams from our other colleagues throughout the year. Next week, we're having a very special Twitch session with one of our young people that stay with us called Robert. He's an absolutely wonderful person and you will love listening to him. So please join us next Wednesday, which is the 2nd of November at 4 o'clock to hear from Robert. So thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.